Welcome to our explainer. Today we're jumping into two conditions you've definitely heard about, autism and ADHD. We're going to break down what they are, how they're different, and maybe most importantly, how they're actually connected. So, what's the deal here? Autism and ADHD? Are they related? Do they just kind of look similar sometimes? That's the big question we're tackling. And, the answer might not be what you think. Okay, first things first, let's get a really clear picture of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. Getting this right is the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about. And that word right there, neurodevelopmental, is super important. It tells us we're not talking about a personality quirk or a choice. We're talking about real, fundamental differences in how the brain develops and processes the world. You can basically think of it as having two main pillars: differences in social communication and the presence of repetitive behaviors or deep interests. So let's break that down even more. Those challenges in social communication, that might mean having a hard time picking up on body language or sarcasm. The restricted and repetitive behaviors can be anything from incredibly deep, passionate interests in very specific things to repetitive movements that help self-soothe. And then you've got sensory sensitivities, which are a huge piece of the puzzle, where everyday things like bright lights or loud noises can feel totally overwhelming. That's why routines are so important. They bring a sense of order and safety to a world that can often feel pretty unpredictable. All right, so that gives us a pretty good handle on autism. But remember, that's only half the equation. So what about ADHD? Let's flip the coin and take a look. Now for the other side of this, attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. And just like with autism, we're going to start from the ground up with the clinical definition to really build our understanding. And yep, there's that word again, neurodevelopmental. So right away, we're talking about something rooted in brain development. At its heart, ADHD is all about a persistent pattern of either inattention or hyperactivity and impulsivity, or sometimes a mix of both, that really gets in the way of day-to-day life. ADHD is often broken down into these three core areas. Inattention isn't just zoning out, it's a genuine struggle to keep your focus, stay organized, or even just remember appointments. Hyperactivity can feel like being powered by a motor, that constant need to fidget, tap, or move around. And impulsivity? Well, that's the difficulty with hitting the pause button, acting without thinking things through, or finding it almost physically painful to wait your turn. Okay, hold on. On the one hand, we have ASD, which seems centered on social cues and routine. On the other, we've got ADD, which is all about attention and impulse control. They sound like they're on totally separate tracks, right? So how in the world do they end up overlapping so often? And this brings us right to the heart of our explainer. We're going to dig into that overlap and also what really makes them different. This is where we start to connect all the dots. Okay, get ready for this, because this number is a real eye-opener. The overlap isn't just a small thing, it's huge. A staggering 70%, that's 70, of people with autism also show significant symptoms of ADHD. This high rate of what experts call comorbidity, which really just means having two conditions at the same time, is exactly why this is such an important conversation to have. Now this slide is maybe the most important one, because it gets to the why behind the behavior. Both autistic people and those with ADHD can struggle with things like managing their emotions or navigating social situations, but the reason is different. For an autistic person, a social challenge might come from trying to translate social cues that aren't intuitive. For a person with ADHD, that same challenge might come from being too impulsive in interrupting or from their attention drifting mid-conversation. See what I mean? Same outcome, totally different root cause. When you see all this together, it really points to a bigger idea. We have to start thinking beyond just the clinical labels themselves and really look at the whole person. So what are the big things to take away from all this? Well, first, ASD and ADHD are their own things, but they show up together a lot. Second, because some of their traits look similar on the surface, getting a clear diagnosis can be tricky. And third, and this is the most important part, what really matters is understanding the unique mix of strengths and challenges for each person so they can get the right kind of support. The goal is to see the person, not just the diagnosis. And that's really the final thought I want to leave you with. Every single mind is unique. Labels like ASD and ADHD are incredibly helpful tools. They give us a framework,
a language to help us understand different ways of experiencing the world. But they are not the whole story. They are not a definition of who a person is. They're just the start of the conversation.